It is rare for a historical record to cause the ink to run from the reader's own tears. But that is the reaction the author describes when encountering the opening chapters of the Book of Judges. The grief stems from a single sentence in verse 10. Another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. For the author, this isn't a cold piece of data. It's a point of deep confusion and pain. They find it difficult to accept that a history so powerful could simply vanish. Joshua's generation saw miracles firsthand. They won the battles. Yet within a single lifetime, that lived experience disappeared, leaving a gap where a shared identity used to be. Before this break, Israel was at a high point. This was the generation that had crossed the Jordan, seen the walls of Jericho fall, and finally walked into the land they had been promised for centuries. Then the record shifts. The very next generation is described as having no knowledge of these events. The stories that defined their parents' lives were gone. This chart visualizes the sharp break in the timeline. We see a sustained level of engagement and history that doesn't slowly erode over centuries. It drops off almost immediately at the transition to the next generation. Typically, cultural memory fades slowly, like the dashed line you see here. But the Book of Judges describes a sudden cliff. This suggests that faith and history aren't carried in the DNA. They require a constant, active handoff to survive. When Joshua's generation stopped that active handoff, the connection to their past didn't just weaken, it severed. This collapse didn't require an invading army or a foreign king to destroy their records. The borders were secure. The change happened inside their own homes and around their own tables. The text points to a specific failure. They stopped speaking about their faith, and they stopped modeling it. They lived their lives, but they didn't show the next generation how or why they did so. As this diagram illustrates, the older generation's spiritual life became a closed loop. By focusing only on their own experiences, they failed to intersect with the next generation, leaving a blank space in their children's lives. This silence creates a vacuum. By failing to fill that space with their own stories and values, they left their children in a state of total exposure. A space that is left empty rarely stays that way. In human history, when a defining story is removed, something else moves in to take its place. Because the youth were left with no knowledge of the Lord or their own history, they began to look at the cultures immediately around them for a sense of direction. The vacuum was filled by the local gods, the Baals and the Ashtaroth. They adopted the rituals and values of the surrounding nations because those were the only models left available to them. The old faith didn't just evaporate into a vacuum, it was replaced by a system that moved in to fill the void. These new influences took hold rapidly. Without an internal compass passed down from their parents, the next generation was reshaped by their environment in a matter of years. The record in Judges shows a clear pattern. When the story of the past is forgotten, a generation will inevitably find something else to follow. This ancient pattern feels uncomfortably familiar when we look at our own time. Like Joshua's generation, many today are inward-focused. We live out our beliefs privately, but we often fail to model them or speak about them to those following us. If we map the cycle from Judges against our own trajectory, the similarities are striking. We are currently in that same phase of silence, a period where the experiences of the older generation are not being effectively shared with the younger. By staying quiet, we are essentially setting the same cycle in motion, creating a void for the next generation to fill however they can. If this continues, the author warns that we will leave behind nothing but modern idols, cultural forces that will shape and corrupt our children, just as Baal did in Israel. Simply feeling bad about this trend isn't enough to change it. The only way to stop the vacuum from forming is to be intentional. Faith and values must be lived out, spoken, and modeled daily, or the surrounding culture will step in to provide its own version. This leads to a necessary pivot from grief to action. As the passage concludes, I cry for my generation, but I want to live for the next.